Tracy's asking, what's a way that you could explain concepts of reincarnation to an average Aussie chick? So I think these two questions go very well together.
Okay. In order to explain reincarnation, you see, because it's like someone who's only known about allopathic medical system asking about acupuncture. You can't squeeze acupuncture into allopathy. They're different languages, different models, different assumptions. So in order to hear the answer, you've got to put aside the assumption of a brain being the main thing, the assumption that your mummy and daddy made you, the assumption that God gave you a soul. You've got to put those aside and then listen freshly to this view, which is coming from the Tibetan Buddhist system, which has been in Tibetan for 1200 years, coming back from the amazing Indian system, which is where it was before that, another 2,500 years or something, which tracks itself back to these genius Indians, about only now about whom we're beginning to learn, who are such geniuses in terms of understanding the universe, in understanding the mind, in medical understanding. They're the ones who created the system of what's called mindfulness, this incredible sophisticated psychological skill that enables you to get your mind to a more subtle level. They're the inventors, as the Dalai Lama says, that was these Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. So we're discussing that model, okay, not the materialist model. So according to that model, and like all these things, you don't know about it first. We have to take it as our working hypothesis, don't we? So the first thing, the fundamental point we have to take as a given, until we look into it, because Buddha might be wrong. He's not a creator. He's not asking us to believe him. He's asking us to take it as a hypothesis and work on it, and discover the truth for ourselves. So the fundamental thing in the Buddhist view is that your consciousness or your mind, and these words are used synonymously, they're words that refer to your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of your inner being. This is known as your mind. It's your actual cognitive process itself, from the most gross, from the most negative to the most positive to the most subtle levels of cognition. And of course, as I'm already indicating, this Buddhist system coming from the Indians before that posited these subtler levels of mind. So this mind of ours, think of it as like a river of mental moments. This moment of consciousness, this moment of cognition coming from the previous moment of cognition. That comes from the previous moment. And anything's like that. This thermos, if you started tracking back, looking for the first moment of this thermos, you would go back and back until the first second of this planet, I promise you. And then you get back to the first Big Bang. And then as His Holiness laughed one time, he says, yeah, Big Bang, no problem. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. Because the Buddhist view is that matter, and they talk about it being made of the four elements. This is how we used to talk back 1,000 years ago in the Western models. They still talk about in the Chinese and the Indian and the Tibetan medical system that matter is made of the four elements. So matter and mind are the contents of the universe, and there are many universes, the Buddha says. So they're beginningless. They can't be anything but beginningless. In other words, this moment of mind comes from a previous moment of mind, which comes from a previous moment of mind. If you had perfect memory, you could track it back to the first second in conception in your mummy's womb, when your mind joined the egg and sperm. So this mind of ours then did not come from a creator, did not come from mummy and daddy, is not physical, is not a function of the brain. Doesn't mean the brain is not important. This is the view. So this is its own entity. Our mind is ours. This is one of the most fundamental points in Buddhism. So, and whatever's in it, if it's mine, guess who put the anger in it? Guess who put the love in it? Guess who put the being good at football or kindness or generosity or psychopathy, whatever the word is. These are all our own, and they come from previous moments of our mind. And the first second of conception, track your egg and sperm back to mummy and daddy. Thank you, mummy and daddy. You track your mind back not to mummy and daddy, not to the egg and sperm, not to your grandma, grandpa and the monkeys, and not to a creator. You track your mind back to previous moments of itself, clearly at a more subtle level. A few weeks before that, it was in a previous body. This is dealt with in vast and extensive depth in the Buddhist literature, and then before that in the Indian, previous before that. This is the findings of these great yogis and blah, blah, blah. So consciousness is a continuity of mental moments. First general point. It's beginningless, and why is it beginningless? It sounds hilarious to us. Well, the Christians have a very extensive teaching. I've got a Buddhist Jesuit friend, a priest, and I talk about these things. I like talking about these things. And they have this whole concept that there can be a first cause, even they use capital F, capital C. That's called God. God does not need a cause. God is beginningless. God is beginningless, but there's no cause of God, and God is permanent and unchanging, and there's no cause, and God is superior, and God creates the universe. Now, I'm not criticizing that view. I think you'd live a good life if you had real faith in a creator like that. Most people second guess God, But that's not the Buddha's view. Absolutely not the Buddha's view. Buddha would say we can all become these amazing beings, like the qualities of omniscience, omnipotence, infinite compassion, infinite wisdom, but they are qualities that are in our own mind. And our mind doesn't have to come from someone else. It's the weirdest idea, because we all think it always comes from someone else and it always has a first moment. But the Buddha say that's a misconception. It's a misconception, because if everything's a law of cause and effect, that means anything you point to at this millisecond, it has to come from a previous moment of something. It didn't come out of a puff of smoke. It's not kind of created from a magic wand. There's no that magical creation idea. Nothing like that. It's absurd, Buddha says. It's just irrational. Everything is a continuity of moments of previous thing. And this moment of mind comes from the previous. So go back 42 million years. Keep tracking your own mind back. Well, this moment of mind came from a previous. Well, what did that come from? A previous. Well, keep going back to find. We always want to find the first previous. You won't. Because whatever you get back to, that moment has to come from a previous moment. Conclusion, as nutty as it is, that consciousness and matter and universes and matter and minds are beginningless. And the Buddhist view would say, and also the Mahayana view, that it's also endless. Matter, the mind. The first point. So, what drives that mind to be whoever we are, a human, an ant, a dog, a this or that, there's all kinds of realms of existence in the Buddhist view. And we look at this concept of the matter as made of the four elements. Well, they describe it in great detail in the Tibetan medical system, which is based on the most advanced of the Buddhist teachings, which are from the Vajrayana, the more esoteric kind of the teachings from what they call Tantra, these very technical teachings, as Lama Yeshe says. It describes the physical matter of the body and the mind and the intimate relationship between mind and matter. So they talk about how we have gross consciousness, our sensory consciousness, which is inextricably linked to our gross body, this bag of bones here, the eyeball, the ear linked to the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness. They work together. Then you've got these subtler levels, and this is described in the Buddhist model in the 8 stages of death. And Lama Zopa's book called How to Face Death Without Fear goes into great detail. It's a crucial point. The whole point about helping people at the time of death of Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, in the understandings that it has, is that at the time of death is when the karmic seeds that will determine our next life are triggered. So the process that runs our mind is this law of karma, a natural law. No one made it up. It's not punishment. It's not reward. There's no creator. Because there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. We hear it like this. It's a natural law that whatever our mind thinks and says and does, and then what we do with our body and speech on the basis of this, program ourselves in this very sophisticated way. We have to learn this because it's a natural law. No one makes it happen. So that's why we need to learn the laws of karma. So we can, like if you have to learn the laws of botany so you can grow a garden. So we have to learn the laws of botany, Buddhist botany, karma, in order to know what are the seeds I want to plant that will bring me future happiness, and what are the seeds I don't want to plant and I want to put atomic bombs under so they don't ripen as future suffering. The whole thing is framed in terms of happiness and suffering. So this process of creating karma, we create our own experiences. We are the fruit. This life now, what happened is, how come we are this person? Who asked the question? The chick.
Was a couple of people.
Who was the Australian chick?
This one was Tracy.
Tracy. Okay, Tracy, honey. There's Tracy. I presume we're referring to a chick, which means a girl. So that means a few weeks before conception in your mummy's womb, honey, unless your mummy got you kind of conceived in a petri dish, but let's assume you were conceived in the old-fashioned way, the daddy hopped into bed with mummy and the egg and sperm came together. So what happened at that moment was your consciousness, the continuity of your consciousness, which a few weeks before that was in a previous body. You could have been human, you could have been something else. But you've got beginningless lifetimes, and every millisecond of whatever you've thought and said and done just pops these karmic seeds into these bank vaults. It's a natural law, you know. So then the one that was triggered before you stop breathing, it's a very precise process. Before you stop breathing, a particular karmic seed, a very strong, virtuous karmic seed of non-harming, in particular non-killing, from your conscious practice of this, probably in the context of a spiritual path. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says there's no way that just, you know, being nice is good enough. We have to practice the virtue in the past, programmed our mind with non-killing, non-stealing, etc., in the context of keeping vows of ethics in context of a spiritual path. Well, one of these virtuous karmic seeds was triggered before you stopped breathing, which already programmed you right there to go to Tracy's mummy's human fallopian tube a few weeks later when she hopped in bed with your daddy. That was already programmed. So they do not make you, baby. They're happily having sex and you come barging in, okay? So all the other karmic seeds that were then triggered that produced the person that you have now become. The second track of karma, the second karmic bank vault, if you like, is all the seeds that produce your personality. You don't get these from your parents. You might share them. They might trigger them. They might enhance them, but they're yours. You come from the past. So you got the karma to be born Tracy with the good tendencies and bad tendencies in little Tracy's mind. You know your own mind. The third kind of karmic bank vault that containing all the seeds that will produce your experiences in this life. So we all know that either good things or bad things happen. You check your life. People have been nice to you. The rats have been mean to you. Your ex-boyfriend was mean to you. This person was kind to you. We've got a variation of friends and enemies, honey. So all those experiences are the fruits of your past karmic seeds, a relationship with those particular people. And this is a natural law. No one runs it. It doesn't need running. You can learn it, then you can run it, but you don't make it up. And even the fourth little bank vault is the seed. It contains the seeds that will produce the very experiences you have, even in relation to the environment. So you're basically the creator of yourself. All these seeds were triggered before you even stopped dying and before you stopped breathing in the past life. So then you died, and then eventually your mind left the body, and then it went into this kind of subtle state, a bit like a dream state. And then you're waiting for your mummy and daddy. You're twiddling your thumbs, waiting for them to get on with it so you can hop in. So they have sex and you come barging in, and then due to your past karma, you got a good, decent human rebirth, cute looking Tracy with good experiences, good tendencies, and a nice environment. You created yourself. Now, if you're a mean and nasty, you know, let's say, we've all done countless things, but let's say the past life, let's say your anger karma was triggered, or your killing karma, we've all got all of these, but let's say they were prevailing. If one of the killing karmic seeds was triggered, then let's say you created the karma to be born to a lion mummy, particular kind of intense anger. You'd spent your life killing people, quite intense, a lot of arrogance, a lot of anger, a lot of harming, very strong. Then you created the course to get born into a mummy's womb. And then, of course, you're going to have a mind that suits a lion's body, aren't you? You're not going to have a cute little kind of mousy mind, little lion sheep walking around saying yes to everybody. No, baby. Especially if you're born a girl mummy, you go around killing all the babies, killing all the people for dinner. So you get a mind that suits that body. Then you have an experience that's similar to the cause. You meet the leopards and you meet the people and the foxes who try to kill you. And then you have an environmental karma, being born in Africa or a Melbourne Zoo or something, or Taronga Zoo or something. So then you could have been born, and then you run like a magnet to a lion mummy, and you get a body that's suitable to the mind you've got. So we've got all these millions of karmic seeds in our mind, and we create all this. It's a natural law. No one runs it. Then you can be born in a spirit, kind of very suffering beings like ghosts of intense energy of attachment. So your body there is like made of air. Your mind is conjoined with air energy. And you can be born as a hell being. Your mind is conjoined with fire. Because all the four elements. And no one runs this show. No one's bossing. No one's punishing. No one's rewarding. This is a natural law. That's Buddha's view.
So then, Venerable,
I need to know if Tracy's happy, please, Miffy. Ask Tracy if she's happy with that.
Oh, Tracy, are you happy with that?
I mean, she might have another question. Hang on a minute. She's asking.
For me.
Good, Tracy. What's the story?
Yep.
Good. Okay, good enough.
So in terms of then these questions about misogyny and how then karmically we must have been misogynist in the past.
Yes, of course that's the whole point. When I first went to my teachings at Chen Reizing Institute, my first teachings from Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche in June 1976 at Chen Reizing, when they didn't even have louver windows in the middle of June, because you ridiculous Queenslanders all think it's hot all the time, I was in a state of complete shock. There was just these gales of wind for 1 month, 2 months, going through these louver windows, 200 people in the squash gomper, and the floor didn't have anything built underneath, so all the air coming from up your bum, freezing you. I can never forget it. In Queensland, saying, oh, it's hot in Queensland. I hadn't noticed. Anyway, that was my first course, I'll never forget. And then I remember I'd been a radical lesbian, separatist, feminist people. I was always a very serious practitioner. I took my philosophy seriously. I began being, like I told you, a Catholic, then a hippie, then a communist, then I heard about the black, and then I heard about feminist. I didn't even know the word. I thought it was feminist. I'd never heard of this boring old women's lib. Then I heard radical. I thought, oh, I like radical. So I became a radical feminist. And then inexorably, of course, I have to keep going further to the outer edge of these things. So I became a radical lesbian. And then I became a radical lesbian separatist feminist. Men were irrelevant, chucked the lot out. I lived for a while on a place. There was something on the telly recently. My friend Karen Higgs was on it. And she bought a place up in northern New South Wales called Amazon Acres. I was just a little bit involved with the women there. I wasn't one of the main ones. But we lived on Amazon Acres. Even boys were not allowed on there because we were serious, radical, lesbian, separatist feminists. So listen, then I realised I could not hate the 99% of the human race. And I gradually went through this process, wanting a spiritual path. Then I bumped into these lamas. I went to this course in Queensland. So honey child, that was the most powerful point for me. Because they're these Tibetans and they're very patriarchal, Lama and Rinpoche weren't, but the system and blah, blah, blah. So it was a shock to me. Part of me knew this was my path. But I knew I had to check because they said, don't believe a single word you're hearing, and there's no creator. It suited me. And I kept hearing this word karma. That was the thing that blew my mind. I knew that was the thing I'd been missing all my life. So when I realized I had to check on this Buddhism. And I knew after those 2 months, I did 1 month of Langri with Lama Zopa, an intensive 1 month with Lama Yeshe. This wonderful book that's been published by Wisdom called Becoming the Compassion Buddha. That was my first retreat with Lama. And it's out now, that wonderful book. So I realized I had to check on this Buddhism, be totally convinced that if it were innately patriarchal, if it were innately, then how could it would be schizophrenic for me as a woman to want to be a Buddhist. So I am here now all these years later because it was clear to me, and that's why it blew my mind, this concept of reincarnation, and no one else telling you what you are, no one making me something. I mean, for me to be in charge, I thought it was the most blissful idea. I'm in charge of who I am. Wow. That I created me. Of course, then I realized I had egg on my face. I've been raped in this life. I've been held up with a gun. I've been abused by my father. Every woman is. So we're discovering every woman on the planet, some man has done something to her. It's normal karma of being female. We're now seeing it, because we all hid it before. We all thought it was our mistake. But of course we've been men in the past. Who but an arrogant rapist male would end up being born a short female who gets raped? This is the joke of karma. It shifts the entire focus, which then you give up and say, oh, well, I deserve it, which is one of the really gross ways that people misunderstand karma. This is why the Tibetans, they know exactly. That's why they don't get angry. This is a very powerful concept, I always give this example. Years ago when I was working in California with the prison project, and Richard Gere, New York, as you know, he's a good Buddhist, he invited His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, to give a talk, 2003. And he invited about 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison, and including some people like me who worked with people in prison. And it was a really moving day, this whole cross-section of Americans, black, white, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, male, female, all who've been in prison, and they had this moving conversation. They met the Dalai Lama. It was a wonderful day. But he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns. Now, these young women, it was clear to everybody that if you want to quantify suffering, you could probably say they had more than everybody else. They were raped, they were sexually abused and tortured while they were in prison, a couple of years or something. Now, this is the point. They weren't angry. We do not trust this in our culture. We think anger and all these things are inherent, intrinsic, and you'd be dementedly mentally ill if you didn't have them. It's got to be more nuanced than you think, okay? So these young women were clearly, evidently not angry, but also they weren't out of their brain. Why did this happen to us? We don't know what we did. Why this injustice? Which is what anger comes from. To analyze this, if you have the philosophical view, which we do in our culture, that you didn't ask to get born, we say it as a joke. It's literally true. If we did not ask to get born, and then our mummy and daddy, these 2 wacko people with their own neuroses, decide to make another version of themselves, I think that's the most demented, schizophrenic view I've ever heard. I'm not trying to be ridiculous here. I'm thoroughly familiar with the Buddhist view, so that's my view now. This seems to me the most terrible idea, that these two wacky people can decide to have sex and make me, chuck me out, and they turn me into some hyper, psychopath or weird person or this or that, and then throughout my life I'm all neurotic and ridiculous and didn't ask to get born and don't know why I am what I am, and then I go to my therapist and she says I should forgive my mother. Well, I disagree. If my mother and father made me, I'm sorry, they are logically responsible. This is logical. This for me is logical. We never question this. It's the most demented idea for my mind. Because I'm used to the Buddhist one now, okay? I'm just going to give some thoughts, food for thought. So these young women don't have that view. They know that, since they're born, Buddhism has been in Tibet like 1,200 years. It's in their bones. 99% were Buddhists. It's sort of the most natural view in the world for them, in the same way the materialist view is natural to us. It's just the view of the world. So they don't have the view, why is this happening to me? I don't deserve it. That thought does not arise in their mind, which is the thought of anger. So they don't have anger. Dalai Lama says these days more Tibetans are getting angry, and that must mean they're not being Buddhist anymore. And he's really sad, It's a philosophical view, not just being a nice girl. It doesn't arise because you know that everything you experience, all the happiness as well, comes from your own past actions. This is just implicit for them. So what was interesting, they know why the suffering is happening. They would, if you give them a key, they would happily have left. Thank you very much. But because they have the view of karma, they know it's their own experience. They know at this moment they can't get out. So they worked with it every day. It was their main spiritual practice. And they became more wise and more compassionate. They got out eventually. And this is the point. One of them was tears, and she said quietly, of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we knew we must have harmed them in the past. That's the logic of karma. And she said, especially the compassion, because we know they will suffer in the future because of what they've done to us. So this is, in Buddhism, this view is the basis of compassion, because compassion isn't just for the innocent victims. Compassion is for every being in the universe. We're all in the same boat, all believing everybody else creates us and creates our suffering and happiness, all looking for happiness out there, all looking for get rid of suffering out there, like mad, We're all in the same boat. And when you've done this work for yourself in the wisdom wing, it's not difficult to have compassion for other people. It is not difficult then, because you've programmed your mind steadily and gradually, incrementally through these stages. And that's what being a Buddhist means, not just watching your stupid breath, but unpacking and unraveling and deconstructing and then reconstructing the conceptual stories deep in the bones of our being.
So Venerable Robina,
I need to know if the person, Miffy, this is a conversation with other people. Who asked that question?
That was Tracy who asked the one about reincarnation.
But who I answered another question. Who answered that one? Or did I answer more of the same?
You answered more of the same, but Janine has kind of followed on from that as saying that then does that mean that we have to face our own...
the person who said misogyny. Who asked that question?
That was me. I asked that.
So then are you satisfied with my answer, Miffy? You just go to the next... You've got to have a conversation. This is a conversation, Miffy. With you, it's a conversation. So did that satisfy? Did you think I didn't cover everything? Because Miffy asked on behalf of everybody else.
I've got two more that flow on from that.
Okay, good, excellent. I'm very happy to hear them.
There's a lot more that flows on with karma. But
go, Miffy. Miffy's utterly unique. I never have any teaching on the planet like I have with Miffy. It's very fascinating. But if it's helpful, I'm happy. Are you enjoying our conversation, you people? Because this is a conversation. This is wonderful. Go, Miffy. And she's asking all the questions we all ask anyway. That's why she's asking. She wants to get ahead of the game.
When I was a little girl, and I used to watch Parkinson on TV, with the
that's right.
interview every
Yes.
Sunday. That was my treat.
That's
and
right.
my aim in life as a 10-year-old girl was to get on Parkinson.
Oh, you'd be very good at it. Now, you need to be Parkinson, though, but you've got to be Parkinson, asking the questions.
So it's changed my aim in life now.
Okay, go on.
So Janine is asking then, does that mean that we have to face our own anger, seeing the violence that, say, men perpetrate, or face our own anger when we experience violence before we can effectively work for social justice?
Of course. With absolute certainty. I mean, you've got to go through the process yourself. You've got to, like I said, the whole thing I said before. Let's say you're in the group called Black in a white supremacist society. You first have to recognize the outrageous suffering, because if you usually in the beginning you're so cowed by it, you know, you don't even admit it. Then when you start to rise up and you realize the outrageousness of the injustice, you're going to have to see that. You've got to get angry in a sense if you've suppressed it all your life, if you've been suppressed. It's like in a relationship. Think of this exactly the same. You're this little mousy victim in a relationship with a bully partner. You've got to start noticing that they're being a bully. You've got to start rising up and stop being such a victim. And then that will include being angry. It's a right part of the process. But then slowly, as you're developing properly, not just trying to bash all the white people or bash your boyfriend to death instead, but you start to then begin to develop yourself. You become your own person. And then, of course, with the view of karma, this is a really serious process all of us go through. And certainly for me in my past, with my political activity and my feminism and being raped and harmed by other men, it was a crucial part of my process to process this in my own mind and then start to just take responsibility, to start to be accountable. It doesn't happen overnight. It's like a revelation, a gradual process, an emotional shift. And then I start to own responsibility, therefore started to stop being angry. Of course, it's logical. Then you can help others. Then you can help others. And then this is the point too, when you know about karma, like I have people come to me with all their problems, right? And one person comes who's just gotten a bully boyfriend. I've got to have a sense of where she's at. I'm not going to give her a lecture about karma. I'm going to tell her to get the hell out of there as quick as she can. You know, just stand up, girl, and be strong. And how dare he harm you? So it depends on the person. If a person comes to me who's been a Buddhist for 42 years and keeps moaning about their husband, I will say one thing quite different. Well, wake up, girl. You've got to practice. No one forced you to be a Buddhist. Understand karma. Start working on your mind, please. But if it's another person who's never done any work on their mind and they're a victim, I will give a completely different piece of advice. You better get out of there. Yes, how dare he harm you? It's really important to know where you're at in this process. It's a very powerful incremental growth, from being the victim to becoming strong, then being compassionate. It's very powerful. And you can't skip the steps. You've got to go through it. And you can't skip the internal one. You can't just rush off and be compassionate. You won't be able to. There'll be too much anger and attachment and fear there. I hope that helps.
Then there's also a question on the other end of the spectrum from Susie, who's asked, can you please speak a bit on attachment in relation to desiring someone when the desire is making you completely bonkers, insane and miserable?
Oh, darling.
Because sometimes even when you know the theories, it's difficult to let go.
Of course it is, darling. This is the tragedy of attachment. It makes up a story. It's coming from attachment. When we understand it emotionally, it's really, this attachment in us is very primordial. It's multifaceted, but it's the energy of this little hungry me feeling I haven't got enough, feeling that I'm not enough, and then projecting all those needs onto this divine, handsome, perfect person, whoever it might be, whatever it might be, believing utterly that when I get him and get his approval and get his and blah, 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 then I'll get satisfied. So then when he stops, and this is the point about the deepest attachment, in relationships especially, where we seem to think it's based on sex, and in a sense, usually the relationship of marriage and that kind of business is based on sex. The sex comes into that part. But really the deepest attachment and why you're having this nightmare, it seems, is when the other person stops approving of us, stops stroking us, stops smiling sweetly. In other words, the attachment, more than for sex, drugs or rock and roll, the deepest attachment that causes the greatest pain is the attachment of being approved of and loved and looked at and stroked. And that's the deepest one and the hardest one to go. And that's the pain in a relationship. When you're in love with each other and it's all hunky-dory and the sex is gorgeous and you each think the others are just a divine being, and then the attachment gets bored, and then he starts not looking at you anymore. It's not even if he doesn't have sex with you anymore. He just stops looking at you, stops approving of you, not to mention beating you. This is the nightmare. This is the nightmare of all attachment. Even it's between you and your sister. Look at sisters, how they fight because one doesn't like you. The pain of not being liked is the worst pain in our lives. And this is pointing to this deepest, most primordial attachment, which is the assumption of a person who's only a half a person. And we have to be approved of. Since we're born, this has been playing the role. Every time you look at your mummy and she smiles at you, even as a baby, we think, oh, that worked. And the next day she punches you in the nose. We get confused. We crave to be approved of. It's almost like the Buddhist saying that we're half a person or less than a half a person. and that we need other people to sustain us and support us and to approve of us. I mean, we can't even look at our mind. We're all the time having conversations, all the time telling people something, having a conversation, wanting people to approve, afraid to think what we're thinking because we don't think people will approve of us. It's so deep we don't even see it. This is our worst suffering of attachment, I tell you.
And Venerable, there were those, the Romanian orphans, you know, that even physically their bodies didn't grow when they were neglected in that orphanage.
So tell me what that conclusion means.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot. It's not just emotionally deep, but it's also biologically hardwired.
I know, but I disagree with that, because I think some people, like, you know, if you're born, I get your point, but the assumption there is you're an ordinary person with a lot of attachment for approval, then your body would shrink. But if you're born as like a little bodhisattva, or a person who's born very content with no attachment, their little body would not shrink, baby, because they don't care, because they've got their own. And this is the point. Always it comes back to the mind. Always it comes back to the mind. I mean, there's a person I know who's a little Tibetan, he's a monk. Actually, Geshe Sopa, it's not secret, it's in his biography. I'm doing the biography of Geshe Kontrog, and Geshe Sopa is his main attendant, as you know. And I've been working on this biography for a while, and then we're doing it again. And then when he's a little boy, he was the first of 6 kids. And his father hated him. He was brutal. He abused him. He called him long neck. He was always mean, always nasty, always unkind, never gave him a sweetie. They get like 1 sweet a month, you know. He was always the most miserable kid, rude. All the other kids rude to him, abusing him, tying him up. He was unhappy, but you could tell by the way he talks. He did not have anger against his father. He just wanted his daddy to love him. And eventually when he was a little monk and daddy approved of him, he was so happy. But he wasn't tortured and suffered. So it always comes back to the mind, Miffy. It doesn't contradict those Romanians, but the assumption is their minds must have been full of terrible attachment to be needed, and they get the karma to be born where they're not needed. That's the pain.
Yeah, so that's the bigger picture too with Buddhism.
Always the bigger picture. That's exactly right.
So Francis Lamont, you've got a question too. I'll just ask you to
Good,
unmute.
Francis. Talk to me, sweetheart. Happy to see you again.
Thank you, Venerable Robina. My question, I finally got the beginningless forever mind, right?
Oh, you did? Good. I'm happy.
And I was really pleased about that. But about 10 minutes ago, you were saying things about, I just realized we don't have the beginningless body. I wasn't me. I've not been me forever.
No, that's right. But the body came from the very subtle wind energy which is conjoined with your mind when it left the previous body, and that very subtle mind with all your karmic imprints in it, and the very subtle mind was conjoined with the very subtle wind energy, which is inextricably linked to your mind, and that then went to Francis's mummy's fallopian tube, where then your wind energy then conjoined with their egg and sperm, and then you grew into your body. So it's the basis of your body is still the very subtle wind that's connected to your mind, and that subtle wind and that subtle mind are beginningless. The wind as well. So the kind of body you get, that's through to your past karma. This is just the grosser level, but the very subtle wind is inextricably linked to the very subtle mind. Never be separate. That's your own wind energy as well.
And that's why that's another light bulb moment for karma. So depending on our wind energy, like I could have been a cockroach in my last life.
Exactly, precisely. So the karmic imprint of being Francis was triggered at the time of your cockroach. Maybe Miffy blew a mantra in your ear, or Miffy was not born then, but a person who was older, maybe they blew a mantra in the cockroach, in the previous person's, in the cockroach's ear, and that triggered one of your human karmic imprints to be triggered, and then you ran like a magnet to Francis's mummy's human womb. Yep. Good, isn't it? There you go.
Or maybe they were a pet listening to Venerable Robina's teaching over the internet.
That's right, the possibility. Yes, that's right, exactly.
Thank you.
There you go. So what else, people? Very interesting evening tonight. Any other questions?
So, Venerable, I was also just thinking in the bigger picture terms that, I mean, it's so overwhelming, the various, you know, misogyny and racism and all of these things, but actually the bigger picture is that we're experiencing these problems in a human body, which is extraordinary.
At least we've got the miracle of intelligence that we can access to help us understand it and deal with it. Even among humans, Miffy, look at the vast majority of humans. I mean, Lama Zopa says, and this sounds so shocking, but let's look at it. The vast majority of humans on this planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind right now, every moment, plays any role at all in their lives. In other words, we're so fixated on everything coming from the outside that you know you're angry and jealous, but you don't think that plays a role. You think it's the people who do it that are the problem. So we don't even know what we do and think and say produces who we become. So it's all out there. So most humans are like that. So most humans aren't conscious. That's not being rude. Most humans don't know how to be conscious, don't know how to own responsibility for our minds. More and more people are doing it these days. At least we've got some good systems in the West of therapy and things, helping people grow up. But there's no awareness. This is the greatest tragedy. So we just keep creating more of the suffering, That's the greatest tragedy. And we think it's all out there. We're an innocent victim. We're always innocent victims, But as Lama Zopa says, everything we see and experience is our own karmic appearance. Everything we experience out there, for us to even recognize it, we created the cause, But the point is, we have got the power to change. So if we can change our mind, we can change our karmic appearances. We can change everything, That's what's so marvelous about Buddha's view. So uplifting, so optimistic,
So Pauline says it seems like our ego is our enemy and we're the ones hurting ourselves by believing its stories.
It's so true. It's just true. My mother always would say, Bobsy, she called me Bobsy or Bobs, you're your own worst enemy. It's really true. I mean, it's a sweet way to put it. Your own worst enemy. I mean, this is really literally what the Buddha is saying. When we realize this is a revelation, because then we can extrapolate and realize we're also responsible for all the good, not just the bad. That's something we really do take time to hear. We take all the good for granted. I've never yet ever had a person ask, why do good things happen? But if we just listed, even in our lives now, if we listed all the good things, like having a house to live in, at least one friend, some money in the bank, able to get breakfast when you feel like it, the shopkeeper smiling at you, the weather being pleasant, reasonable health, all the millions of things in one day, we utterly only take them for granted. Why? Because attachment, the hubris of attachment that drives us, very subtle, is that I deserve this, so why would we take it for granted? But the millisecond an unkind thing happens, we have a panic attack, and how dare that happen, because I don't deserve it. But all the good happens, and we should be blissed out every day, because we created it. We created every millisecond of anything that happens to us. When we think of the good, this should completely shift our minds, Then it makes us brave enough to own the bad. Excuse me. Excuse me. What else?
And so then, Venerable, with your analogy of saying learning to play tennis and then putting all the effort into the tennis, then if we do that, I mean, sometimes we can get just so focused on how hard it is, we forget about the joy of tennis or even about what the whole point of tennis is, because it's just like, oh my God, this is too hard.
Unmute me.
Oh, hang on. Here we go. Yep.
Okay.
No, got to find you. That's ironic.
There we go. Thank you. So therefore, go on. Conclusion? Question?
So how do we remember because it's kind of natural to just end up focusing on all those negativities. How do we kind of reboot?
This is so incredibly hard. It is the hardest thing every single human being you meet, unless they're born already with pretty advanced practice. It's the normal human being, even nice people, like us, The normal one is that the delusions seem to loom larger, much larger in our head than our virtues. This is the point now. Okay. The function of attachment, like I said, it's multifaceted. So from having practiced always being hungry, attachment is emotional hunger, always wanting something more. And that means whatever you get, even when you get what you want, you're still not satisfied. You get the cake, and then after 3 minutes, you're dissatisfied again. So whatever you get, attachment is this tricky thing that it doesn't bring satisfaction at all, but we don't notice. So all it does is bring more dissatisfaction. So especially if we practice very strongly in a past, we get born in this life with a good human body, with good qualities and all the rest. But if we've got very strong attachment, and we all have, the level we experience the pain of it is this one of dissatisfaction. So not just with what I've got, but with who I am. And that's the worst suffering Lama Zopa feels in the West. This deep primordial feeling, basically, that I'm not enough. And we call it self-hate. But it's the literal consequence of constantly wanting more, constantly not being satisfied. Some people, you might be dissatisfied with, it's the outside thing. You always want more food, more this, more money, more boyfriends, more whatever. But this one is much more primordial. You're not satisfied with who you are. And we all know this is true. No matter what we achieve, it's not enough. How nice we look, it's not enough. How much we change our body, it's not enough. We always see the faults. Anybody you ever talk to, they will say that. I saw on Netflix a documentary about Audrey Hepburn. How she was utterly worshipped and adored by the world. She was this cutest thing. She seemed compassionate. She seemed kind. She worked for the United Nations. She worked for people. She seemed like the most incredibly kind, compassionate person. And as she said, I was never enough. My hair should have been this. I should have had blonde hair. My nose was wrong. I did this. I didn't do that. It's just the natural way we are as long as we have attachment. So it's just like, when they say about anorexics, what's that term they use? Body, what's that?
Body dysmorphia.
That's one. We've all got it. Listen, why? Because it's attachment. Anorexia and bulimia are just extreme examples of attachment in relation to the body and food. We've all variations of that. There's just a question of degree. It's just that in our culture, we sort of think when it's extreme, we call it a mental illness. But Buddha's basically saying, if you've got any attachment at all, baby, you've got mental illness. He's just more radical in his view of what is mentally stable. So we've all got that thing. We all think we see one thing in the mirror and other people see something else. This is the nature of attachment. That's its function. So how do you change it? I'm sorry, it's cognitive therapy. You catch it. The tragedy is we believe it 1,000,000,000%. We never question. That's the thing we've got to look at. So we should question it and start to write a new script. And I am not joking. And of course, it's going to take time. This old view has been there for a long time. You can't make it go away overnight. But the key thing is, as Lama Zopa says, it's bad enough that the way we appear to ourselves is faulty. But the worst thing is we believe it's true and nobody ever questions it. That's what we have to start doing. It's like a miracle when we can do it, but it takes time. It's a process, a gradual, slow process. But that's the thing. Don't just assume your depression is right. Because it's all conceptual stories. Don't assume your anger, your guilt, your this, your jealousy, your whatever. Don't assume they're correct. Adjust your script. Literally learn. Buddha's a brilliant cognitive therapist. I'm not joking. But it takes time. In other words, I'm telling you how to play tennis now, how to do your backhand, but you've got to do other work first. So when you've got, you go to Federer today and ask him how to show you how to do a good backhand. He'll look at you because you've never played tennis before, and he'll go, well, honey, you better go off and lose 20 kilos and then go to university and learn tennis philosophy and then learn and then do lots of jogging and live in nutrition and work for a couple of years and then come back. And you'll say, no, Roger, you didn't hear me. Please show me how to play a backhand. He'll repeat the answer. So the same with changing your mind. This is the actual job of playing tennis. This is the actual job of being a Buddhist. But you've got to do your prostrations and your work and your purification and live in vows. That's like all the jogging and that's why they call them preliminary practices. They prime your mind to be able to do this brilliant job of reconfiguring your own concepts. It's pretty intense stuff, I tell you.
So Pauline said, okay, so I'm going to give my ego a name when it talks to me like that.
No, but you see, ego is a bit of a concrete term. Don't call it that. You've got the Buddha, the Lamas, the Tibetans, they talk about, well, the anger says this, jealousy says that, low self-esteem says this. There's thousands of them. So don't just say it's ego. Don't give them one name. You've got a whole bunch of roommates in there, baby. You've got to locate each roommate and listen exactly to their story. So for example, one neurotic roommate is called low self-esteem. And that means, I'm not so good. That's one roommate, low self-esteem. There's another roommate called arrogance, which is the flip side, that over-exaggerates. So all delusions over-exaggerate something. So low self-esteem says, I'm not good enough. Arrogance says, I'm better than I really am. They're both exaggerations. But there's another one called, like I said before, attachment to what people think. That's the voice that always wants other people to be saying I'm a good person. But pride is also the same, but it's slightly different. So pride, kind of puffed up, over-exaggerating certain characteristics of yourself, is very similar to attachment to reputation. But you've got to hear the difference. They're like twins, but they're different. So don't say ego. Give each one their name. They've got thousands of roommates in there. And then you've got to bring out the kind roommate and the generous roommate and the loving roommate and the forgiving roommate and the not guilty roommate, because they're all there, but they're hiding in the cupboard and under the bed. Bring them out, baby. And they can argue with the crazies. That's the way. You've got to be individual. Each thought is a particular roommate. You've got to identify each one precisely. This is the job of being your own therapist, as Lama she puts it, I promise you.
What about compulsive doubt, Venerable?
I know that's a painful. I know that's a difficult one. Back and forth, like, you must have 6 planets in Libra.
Yeah, well, you know what a doubter would say about that.
There you go. That's right. Listen, what's the time? I've got to start. It's
five
okay.
minutes.
I've got 5 minutes. Then I've got to give a talk to Nobu Ling. It's okay. I'll just carry on the conversation. But I can just kind of move into. It's okay there. Right. It's fine. So we're good. So doubt's a difficult one. But analyze what doubt is. Doubt is this right or is this right? Shall I do this or shall I do that? But I've got a feeling we've got to look underneath why we're afraid to make the decision. And it has to be attachment. An attachment to being seen to doing the wrong thing, or attachment to missing out. That's behind doubt. Doubt, because if you decide this, attachment is a bit greedy and doesn't want to, it's like a little kid who wants all the lollies, But attachment, so if you've got a fear of missing out on one thing, that makes you scared to choose the other. I think you've got to look under the doubt. The other one that's behind doubt, like I said, is that you're afraid of making the wrong decision, which means you'll get criticized. So check beneath the doubt. And then when you have the courage, you know you won't miss out, so you'll make the decision. And then it doesn't matter what people think, and you'll be able to make the decision. I think doubt is a superficial one. Doubt has got something underneath it that's deeper, and it's attachment to either being seen to be a good girl or attachment to missing out on the other one. You've got to look deeper.
And what about if you doubt your own analysis or your own beliefs, that kind of doubt of the fear?
That's what I'm talking about. I think that's a more subtle, but it's still the same thing. You're afraid to make a decision about what you think, because you're afraid of what people think of you, or you're afraid of missing out on something. Maybe it's more that one. The attachment to what people think of us is a pretty primordial one. It's under much of our suffering. We just never notice it until we never really pay attention to it, because it's so embedded there. That, I think, is probably underneath for most of us. Afraid of being seen to do the wrong thing. Afraid of making the wrong decision, of being criticized. I think it's quite powerful.
And what about if you're just afraid of going down the wrong path? And if we're just starting off on a spiritual journey or this internal kind of thing, how do we know we're not being totally misled?
I think that's exactly the same, and we are very good at this in the West. And you meet one tennis club and you suddenly leap in and go to that tennis club. You've done no research, no market research, you've done no asking nobody else, you've done no checking. But if you do your analysis, you're checking, and it's logical, you're going to end up fine. And then you go meet the different tennis coaches and you trust your own feeling about the person, you check the students, you check what it's like, you check their rates, you check their history. Then that's the basis of a decision. Doubt isn't just going against doubt doesn't just grabbing any old decision. You use your intelligence, you go further. Often doubt too is just sitting on the surface and doesn't go deeper, doesn't do the logical analysis. Because doubt is a question, and all questions have answers, but you've got to penetrate and do some logic analysis and unpacking, not just be superficial.
So that takes it back to the attachment, because often with doubt we're too frightened to analyse in case we get an answer we don't want.
Well, also that too, I think definitely that as well.
Yeah.
And this is where, it sounds very kind of a bit sort of spacey, but it's very powerful. So His Holiness Dalai Lama always would say, always aspire, and we'll finish with this, always aspire to do what is most beneficial. So before we analyse further, that's now me talking now, what does it mean by beneficial? It means beneficial for you to develop the wisdom wing and beneficial for you to be able to help others. So then we'll say, but I don't know what's beneficial. Well, that's the point. Now, when we understand karma, that every thought you have, intention is the main thing that drives our mind every second. There's always an intention. I will. It's volition. So it's the main karma is mental action, which is intention. So by saying, may I do what is most beneficial, you sow the seed. You don't know what it is, but you sow the seed. Every thought you have sows a seed. So for me, it's the analogy. I always use the analogy. You're walking on a road and you don't know where the turnoff is, But listen, honey, this is your life. This road is your life. So what else can you do? You don't know what to do in 3 years, 1 year, 1 year. You don't know what to do next. You feel like you've come to this point, but you haven't got the crossroad yet. There's no street there. There's no obvious option. So what do? You wake up in the morning and there you are with Fred and the 3 kids and the horrible job, and you don't know what to do next. Now, you can't go back. You can't stand still. You can't take any old cute turn off because it looks easy. You've got to do today's life best. You've got to put one foot in front of the other on this path, your road that you created, and you've got to have this aspiration. It's like saying, may I do what's most beneficial means may I recognize the right turn off. You don't know what it is, so don't chew it like a dog with a bone, but have that aspiration. And this is how karma works. Every time you say, may I do what's most beneficial, this is the most stupendous thought you could ever have. It's like bodhicitta. It's unbelievable. So guess what that does? It programs your mind in that tendency. It makes you brave. You put one foot in front of the other. You deal with Fred. You deal with the kids. You deal with what's right in front of you. You're not looking, where's the road? Where's the road? You're dealing with what's in front of you. And then the point is also that aspiration, sincerely wanting to do what is most beneficial, that powerful thought will nourish the karmic seeds you've planted in the past, and that will ripen exactly the right one. And then one day you'll go, oh, there it is. Bye, Fred. I'm out of here. And you'll make the right decision, even if it's a tough one. So you take it in a gradual, you don't try to chew a dog like with a bone. You don't try to make a perfect answer. And with doubt, you just stop thinking it. You just move forward, but deal with what's right in front of you. And if you do this one nicely, you'll do tomorrow nicely. You do tomorrow nicely, it'll lead you to the next one, driven by this aspiration. And then one day, all of that karma will come together and you will see it clearly in front of you.
Mm.
All right.
Venerable, we're coming to the end of our time together, and I wanted to thank you so much for the teachings, and also to let everybody know, thank you. You must have all had an enormous amount of merit, because this teaching didn't almost happen. Because when I requested Venerable Robina to lead the course, and she said yeah, and we talked about dates, and then I was supposed to get back to her about what the title was.
That's right.
And I never did. So just a couple of days before the first teaching, I emailed Venerable saying, oh, we're really looking forward to the teaching. And she went, what teaching?
That's right.
And I had a heart attack. Anyway, it's clearly because of everybody's good karma and merit that Venerable happened to have a space in her busy schedule for us to just be able to slot in there like nothing ever happened.
Because 5 p.m. is not the time they have teachings in New Mexico. This is sort of morning time is European time for me, my time, and afternoon is Australian time, because it's your tomorrow morning. I'm the day behind, So it worked very nicely. So thank you.
It worked, and thank you so much for, at such short notice, being able to accommodate us all and really sharing some incredible advice. Every teaching that we have with you, Venerable, I go, oh, that was the best one yet.
Miffy, you're so wonderful. This is our last one, right? We're finished, aren't we? Okay,
if you'd like to do a little dedication, and then thank you so much.
We can do so. We do it in English. We just think every moment. As many thoughts as there have been since we started is as many seeds we've planted. And all these seeds, we want them to be nourished. We want them to grow as we motivate it in the amazing development of our marvelous potential as a Buddha. Why? Because then we can benefit others. So we want to nourish these seeds from this moment forward with our effort. Wherever we're at on this path, it's our road, it's our karmic appearance. That crummy husband, that lousy job, it's yours, baby. You created it. So own it, eat it up for breakfast, leave it, whatever's beneficial. Do whatever's beneficial. Always make an aspiration. May I do what's most beneficial, nourishing these seeds so you do develop your amazing potential, so you can be a benefit to others, and no matter how long it takes. Long-term view, perspective, long-term view, okay? Never give up. Jangchog, Semchog, Rinpoche, Makye, Panam Kegyu Chig, Kye Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne Gong Du, Pelba Shog. And that's made this bodhicitta grow and grow and grow in the hearts of all. That's it. Thank you, precious. Thank you, precious ones, all of you. See you again somewhere, who knows. Thank you, darlings. Much love. Thank you for inviting me, Miffy, and I was glad we had the time. Thank you, darling. Much love, everybody. Thank you so much.